I woke up on my 36th birthday, expecting a quiet day. I had even turned off my phone the night before, thinking I'd sleep in, order some takeout, and avoid the usual forced cheerfulness that birthdays bring. Andrea had said she had to work a long shift, so I figured I'd have the house to myself. Instead, I found a small box on the kitchen counter with a neat silver ribbon and a card with my name on it. For a second, I smiled. Andrea wasn't the most sentimental person, but I thought maybe she had planned something thoughtful. I tore the envelope open first. The note inside was short, written in her perfect handwriting. Victor, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I can't do this anymore. I've met someone else, Dorian. He's a doctor, and he makes me feel alive in ways I never felt with you. Please don't try to find me. I must have read it 3 times before it sank in. Gone. Someone else. Dorian. I felt my legs go weak, like someone had kicked them out from under me. I sat at the table, staring at the words, hoping they'd rearrange themselves into a cruel joke. But they didn't. Andrea had left me. On my birthday. I don't know how long I sat there before I started piecing things together. Her late nights at the gym, the way she'd grab her phone the second it buzzed, always turning the screen away. The nights she'd pull away when I tried to hold her. I had ignored all of it, telling myself she was just stressed with wedding plans. I was an idiot. Shaking, I grabbed my laptop and logged into our shared cloud account. I didn't even know what I was looking for until I saw a new album. It was titled Vacation. We hadn't been on any vacation. My heart sank. Inside were pictures of her and a man I had never met. Dorian, I guessed. Selfies of them at some cabin, his arm wrapped around her waist like she belonged to him. In one, they were in bed, her face pressed against his bare chest. I scrolled through messages too, texts that left no room for doubt. Last night was perfect. Can't wait until you're all mine. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath coming in short bursts. My hands were shaking so badly I knocked over my coffee mug. I wasn't just hurt. I was humiliated. This wasn't just some fling. She had been planning her life with him while I was paying deposits for a wedding that would never happen. I walked around the house, every corner of it suddenly tainted. The kitchen where we had argued about which backsplash tiles to pick. The living room where we had planned our first Christmas tree. It all felt like a lie. I saw my reflection in the window and barely recognized myself. A fool with messy hair and eyes that looked hollow. A part of me wanted to call her, scream, demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my phone and scrolled through every text she'd sent me over the past few weeks, now seeing them for what they were, cold, distant, full of excuses. I felt something inside me twist, a mix of heartbreak and rising anger. By the time the sun had fully risen, I wasn't thinking about my birthday anymore. I was thinking about every sign I had ignored, every moment I had chosen to trust her. And I swore to myself, sitting there with her letter crumpled in my fist, that I wouldn't let her or this Dorian make me feel powerless. Not anymore. I spent the rest of that morning moving through the house like a ghost. Every room felt foreign, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I finally sat on the edge of the couch, my hands still trembling. I didn't know who else to call, so I dialed Joseph, my closest friend since high school. He picked up on the second ring. Victor, happy birthday, man. You ready for a few drinks later? I swallowed hard. Joseph, Andrea's gone. She left me. For some guy named Dorian. The line went silent for a few seconds. Then he sighed, and something in that sound made my stomach drop. Vic, I didn't want to tell you like this. I knew about them. For a while. It felt like the floor shifted under me. You knew? What the hell do you mean you knew? My voice cracked, half anger, half disbelief. I saw them together a couple of months ago, he admitted. I wanted to tell you, but you were so excited about the wedding. I didn't want to. I thought maybe it would blow over. Blow over? I repeated, my voice rising. Joseph, she was planning a whole life with him while I was buying wedding rings. I'm sorry, man, he said softly. I didn't want to be the one to break your heart. His words burned. I ended the call before I said something I'd regret. The betrayal wasn't just from Andrea anymore. Now it was Joseph too. I had never felt so alone in my life. I walked into the kitchen and stared at the gift box she'd left, still sitting on the counter like some kind of mockery. I picked it up and almost threw it against the wall but stopped. It wasn't worth the energy. None of it was. For a long time, I just stood there, my mind spinning between anger and numbness. I wanted to smash something, but I forced myself to breathe and think. What did I really have left to lose? I wasn't going to give Andrea or Dorian the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. The first thing I did was grab the folder with all the wedding paperwork. I sat at the kitchen table and called the insurance company to cancel the wedding insurance policy we'd taken out. The woman on the phone asked if I was sure. Absolutely, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The wedding's not happening. When I hung up, I felt a flicker of control return. I couldn't undo what Andrea had done, but I could stop letting her and this doctor play with my life. I had built everything I owned with my own hands. My house, my savings, my career. I wasn't about to let her walk away with any of it. As the day turned to evening, I sat in silence with a beer in my hand, Max the cat curled up on the couch beside me. My birthday was ruined, my relationship destroyed, but something inside me was starting to harden. I wasn't just the victim anymore. I was planning my next move. The next few days passed in a blur. I called in a week of personal leave from work, claiming I needed time to deal with family issues. That was putting it mildly. I barely ate, barely slept, but I wasn't sitting around moping either. Every hour I spent alone in that quiet house, I kept thinking about Andrea. Her smile when she asked me to handle another bill. Her fake excuses when she'd roll in late at night. The anger kept me moving. On the third morning, I woke up with a plan. If she wanted to start a new life with Dorian, she could do it without a single dime of mine. The house was in my name. She'd been living here for free, and I wasn't about to let her keep a key. I drove to the hardware store, bought a new set of locks, and spent the afternoon changing every door in the house. The metallic clicks of the screws turning felt like therapy. With each door I secured, I imagined Andrea trying to come back, thinking she could grab her things or talk her way in. Not this time. Once the locks were done, I sat at my desk and opened up our joint bank account. We didn't have a lot of money together. I'd been the one paying most of the bills, but I wasn't going to give her easy access to even a penny. I transferred everything into my personal account and then closed the joint one. Watching the balance drop to zero on her end gave me the first real smile I'd had in days. That night, I went through every corner of the house, collecting anything that belonged to her. Jewelry boxes, hair straighteners, random shoes she'd kicked under the bed. I piled them all into boxes in the garage. It wasn't just about getting rid of her stuff. It was about reclaiming my space. The next day, I started making calls. The wedding venue had our deposit under both our names, but I quickly had them transfer it over to just mine. The photographer was the same. I explained that Andrea and I had mutually canceled the wedding. I said it calmly, but inside, I was on fire. Every vendor I contacted, every contract I reclaimed, felt like pulling my life back from the mess she left. In the evenings, I sat with my laptop, combing through all the photos and messages I'd found in our shared cloud. It was like staring at a wound that wouldn't close, but I forced myself to look. I organized everything into a single folder, screenshots of texts, pictures of her and Dorian, even the receipts for hotel bookings I hadn't known about. I wasn't sure what I'd do with the evidence yet, but I wanted to be prepared. If she or her doctor boyfriend tried to come after me for anything, money, property, or even some fabricated story, I'd have all the proof I needed to show who they really were. By Friday, the house felt different. Cleaner. Lighter. I wasn't over her betrayal, not by a long shot, but I no longer felt like a broken man. I'd stopped asking why she left and started thinking what's next. That night, I poured myself a drink, sat on the porch, and watched the sun set over the quiet street. My life wasn't what I wanted it to be, but I still had my dignity, my home, and my future. And I was going to make sure Andrea and Dorian regretted every second they thought they could play me for a fool. The call from Thomas Whitfield came on a Sunday morning, just as I was finishing my coffee. His voice was sharp, the kind of tone you'd expect from a man who spent decades intimidating people in courtrooms. "Victor," he said, skipping any greeting. "We need to talk about Andrea's things. She tells me you've been unreasonable." I leaned back in my chair, letting his words hang for a second. "Unreasonable? Thomas, she left me. On my birthday. For another man. I don't owe her a thing." He let out a humorless chuckle. "You're still living in that house you two shared, aren't you? Legally, she's entitled to her belongings and a share of the wedding deposits. If you don't cooperate, we'll handle this through legal channels." I almost laughed. Thomas was good. I'll give him that. But he had no idea what I had sitting on my laptop. "Thomas," I said, my voice low and steady, "you might want to hear me out before you start throwing threats around." "I'm listening," he said, his tone full of arrogance. "I have evidence," I replied. "Plenty of it. Pictures, texts, the works. Andrea didn't just leave me. She's been having an affair for months. With a doctor named Dorian. Do you really want me to share those photos in a legal dispute?" There was a pause on the other end. I could practically hear him calculating the damage, thinking of his reputation and how quickly things could spiral if this went public. "You're bluffing," he said finally, though there was less confidence in his voice. "Am I?" I said, opening one of the images on my laptop, a picture of Andrea and Dorian in bed together. "If you'd like, I can email you a preview. But something tells me you'd rather keep this quiet." Another long silence. Then, his voice softened, but only slightly. "What do you want, Victor?" "It's simple," I said. "Andrea gets the boxes of her stuff I packed up in the garage. That's it. She has no claim to the house, the accounts, or any of the wedding money. If she pushes me, I'll make sure everyone, including her mother, her friends, and your firm, knows exactly why your daughter's wedding fell apart. Thomas exhaled, the kind of slow, controlled breath of a man who hates losing but knows when he's cornered. Fine, he said. I'll talk to Andrea. But you haven't heard the last of this. I'm sure I haven't, I said, hanging up before he could say another word. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small surge of satisfaction. Thomas Whitfield, the man who once treated me like I wasn't good enough for his daughter, had just realized I wasn't someone he could push around. A few days after my standoff with Thomas, I met up with Joseph at a quiet bar near downtown. I hadn't spoken to him much since our tense phone call, but I needed answers. He showed up looking uneasy, rubbing the back of his neck as he sat down across from me. Vic, I feel like I owe you more than just an apology, he said. You think? I replied, my tone sharper than I intended. You knew about Andrea and this guy, and you let me keep planning a wedding. Why? Joseph stared into his beer before answering. I didn't know how to tell you. The first time I saw them, I thought maybe it was just a friendly dinner. But then I ran into them again outside some upscale restaurant, and they weren't just having dinner. I wanted to say something, but, man, you looked so happy when you talked about her. I clenched my jaw. Happy? I was living in a fantasy, and everyone but me knew it. There's more, he said, lowering his voice. Dorian isn't exactly the guy she thinks he is. He's got a reputation at the hospital. Prescription drug issues. I've got a friend who works in HR over there, and they've been covering his messes for years because of his connections. He's one mistake away from losing his license. That got my attention. You're telling me Andrea left me for some guy who's barely keeping his career together? Joseph nodded. I figured you should know. He's not clean, Vic. You dig around a little, you'll find plenty. Later that night, I sat at my desk, Joseph's words still echoing in my head. If Dorian was as reckless as Joseph claimed, then maybe, just maybe, I could use that. I started digging. I scrolled through public records, old news articles, and hospital review boards. It took hours, but I started to find pieces of the puzzle. There were subtle references to Dorian being suspended years back, mentions of unethical behavior in old forums, even a few court records tied to his name. He wasn't some perfect doctor. He was a ticking time bomb. Still, I wanted more than internet gossip. I needed first-hand dirt. That's when I decided to call the one person who would know what it was like to be on the other side of him. Through some careful social media sleuthing, I tracked down a nurse named Stephanie who had been tagged in photos with him years ago. I sent her a message, not expecting much. To my surprise, she called me the next evening. Victor, right? You're Andrea's ex-fiancé? She asked. Yeah, and I'm guessing you're Dorian's ex? She laughed bitterly. Ex is putting it lightly. He's charming at first, but once he gets comfortable, it's all control and lies. He's got a habit of using people, both in and out of the hospital. And don't get me started on the pills. He's been stealing from the pharmacy for years. Everyone knows it, but no one wants to be the one to take him down. Her words hit me like a spark to gasoline. This wasn't just about Andrea anymore. Dorian was dangerous, and he deserved to pay for what he'd done. To me, to Stephanie, and to whoever else he'd manipulated. Would you be willing to share what you know? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Absolutely. I've been waiting for someone to expose him. I've got screenshots, old texts, even a video of him pocketing meds during a shift. You can have it all. By the end of the call, she had emailed me a small mountain of evidence. As I sat there looking through the files, something hardened inside me. Andrea and Dorian thought they could walk over me like I was nothing. They had no idea what was coming. By the time the weekend rolled around, I felt like I had a blueprint forming in my mind. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of being petty anymore. Dorian wasn't just some guy who stole my fiancée. He was a walking disaster that somehow managed to skate through life without consequences. That was about to change. I reached out to Clara, Andrea's younger sister. She and I had always gotten along, mostly because she never worshipped Andrea the way the rest of the family did. I wasn't sure how she'd react to hearing from me, but when I texted her, she replied almost immediately. Victor, I was wondering when you'd call. Andrea's been spinning some wild stories about you. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop outside of town. Clara walked in wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair tied back like she didn't care about impressing anyone. The opposite of Andrea in every way. She sat down across from me, crossing her arms. I heard about Andrea leaving you, she said softly. I wanted to reach out, but Dad's been well, Dad. Yeah, Thomas already tried to scare me with legal threats, I said. Didn't go well for him. She smirked. I bet it didn't. So why call me now? I leaned in. I know about Dorian. I know about the pills, the affairs, all of it. And I'm not going to let him get away with it. I just need someone on the inside, someone who knows how bad things really are between them. Clara's expression darkened. Oh, you mean the shouting matches? The time she's called me crying because he's drunk and tearing into her? She thought she was upgrading when she left you for him. Big mistake. Do you have proof? I asked. I have text, Victor. She sent me messages at 2 in the morning begging me to come get her. And if you're planning to expose him, you should know Andrea isn't exactly innocent here. She's been draining her savings for him, paying off his gambling debts. That was news to me, but it didn't surprise me. Andrea had always been drawn to the kind of drama she claimed to hate. Would you be willing to help me? I asked carefully. Clara's answer was immediate. Yes. Andrea needs to face the mess she's made. And Dorian? He's toxic. If you can take him down, I'm in. Between Clara's texts and Stephanie's files, I had enough evidence to draw blood. The next step was figuring out how to use it without dragging myself into a legal nightmare. That's when I remembered an old college friend, Mason, who worked for the state medical board. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but when I called, he picked up like no time had passed. Mason, I've got a doctor who's been abusing prescriptions and covering it up. I've got hard evidence, videos, messages, everything. What's the best way to get this in front of the right people? Send me what you have, he said without hesitation. If this is legit, the board will launch an investigation immediately. And if he's on the edge like you say, this could suspend his license. That night, I compiled everything. Stephanie's videos, Clara's texts, screenshots of Dorian bragging to Andrea about swiping painkillers. I sent it all to Mason anonymously, ensuring that if Dorian traced it back, my name wouldn't come up. For the first time since Andrea left, I felt in control. Dorian's career was a house of cards, and I'd just pulled out the bottom piece. It didn't take long for the first cracks in Dorian's perfect facade to appear. 3 days after I sent the files to Mason, I got a text from Clara. You might want to check the hospital news board. Something's happening. I pulled up the hospital's internal bulletins online, something I wouldn't have thought to look at if Clara hadn't tipped me off. There it was, in black and white. Dr. Dorian Mitchell has been placed on temporary leave pending an internal review. I couldn't help but laugh. The man who thought he was untouchable was already being cornered. That night, Clara called me. You have no idea how bad it's getting, she said. Andrea is freaking out. She thought she'd landed some perfect catch, and now she's dealing with a guy who spends all day screaming about his ruined career. Let me guess, I said. He's blaming everyone but himself? Exactly, she replied. He's blaming the hospital, Andrea, anyone within shouting distance. I think he's drinking again, too. She called me yesterday in tears because he punched a hole in the wall. I let her words sink in. As much as I hated Andrea for what she'd done, part of me almost pitied her. She had traded a stable life for chaos, and now she was drowning in it. But pity only went so far. She made her choice. By the end of the week, the hospital announced that Dorian had been officially suspended while the medical board conducted a full investigation. Mason had kept me updated, saying the evidence I'd given him was damning. The video of him pocketing oxycodone was enough to raise alarms. Mason had told me over the phone. But the texts about reselling meds? That's going to bury him. I wasn't done yet. I wanted Andrea to know exactly what kind of man she had chosen. So when Clara mentioned that Andrea was still posting happy pictures of them on social media, pretending everything was perfect, I decided to twist the knife a little. I sent Andrea a simple message. Hope Dorian's doing okay with the investigation. Must be hard for you two right now. It didn't take her long to reply. What are you talking about? I ignored her, let her stew in the uncertainty. By the next day, she was blowing up Clara's phone, demanding answers. Clara played it cool, saying only, maybe you should talk to Dorian about what he's been hiding. A week later, Clara called me again. You're not going to believe this, she said, her voice barely containing a grin. Dorian's lost it. He's been drinking every night, blaming Andrea for everything. She's staying at Dad's for a few days because she's scared of him. Did she figure out I had a hand in this? I asked. Not yet, Clara replied. But even if she does, what's she going to do? She can't exactly defend him now that the whole hospital knows what he's been doing. I leaned back on the couch. Max curled beside me and let the satisfaction wash over me. For weeks, I had been the one feeling helpless, betrayed, and humiliated. But now, I was the one holding the cards. By the end of that month, Dorian's name was in every hospital whisper chain. Doctors who once treated him like one of their own were now distancing themselves. Clara told me that Andrea was starting to see just how bad her perfect man really was. She's in denial, Clara said one evening. But trust me, Vic, the cracks are showing. It's only a matter of time before she comes crawling back. Good, I replied with a bitter laugh. Because when she does, I'll be ready. It was a little after 9 on a rainy Thursday night when I heard the knock on my door. Max, curled on the couch, perked his ears and bolted to the entryway like he was ready to defend the house. I wasn't expecting anyone, but something in my gut told me who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Andrea stood there, soaked from the rain, Her mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the woman who had walked out of my life with a smug little note. She looked broken. "Victor," she said the second I opened the door, her voice trembling. "Please." I didn't know where else to go. I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. "What do you want, Andrea?" "Please, just listen to me," she pleaded. "Dorian, everything's falling apart. He's drinking all the time, screaming at me, blaming me for losing his job. I can't do this anymore. I just need somewhere safe to stay, just for a few days." I stared at her, rain dripping from her hair onto the welcome mat. "Safe? That's rich coming from you. You left me for him. On my birthday, remember?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I know. I was stupid. I thought I loved him, but he's not who I thought he was. Please, Victor. I don't have anyone else." I let out a humorless laugh. "You didn't think about that when you were sneaking off to hotels with him, did you? When you sent me that note like I was some disposable roommate?" "Victor, I'm sorry," she started, but I cut her off. "No, you're sorry because your perfect little life blew up in your face. I told you I wasn't going to be your backup plan, and I meant it." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "And just so you know, I'm the reason Dorian's life is in shambles. I sent the evidence to the medical board. I made sure everyone saw what he really is." Her mouth fell open. You did this." "Damn right I did," I said. "You betrayed me. You lied to me. And now you get to live with the choices you made." For a moment, she just stood there, rain pouring down her face, her lips trembling. "I thought you loved me," she whispered. "I did," I said coldly. "But love doesn't survive this kind of betrayal. You made your bed, Andrea. Go sleep in it, just not here." I shut the door before she could respond. For a second, I stood there, hand pressed against the wood, listening to the sound of her footsteps retreating into the night. Max rubbed against my leg, as if reminding me I wasn't alone. And for the first time since she left, I felt completely in control. The night after Andrea showed up at my door, I slept better than I had in months. It wasn't because her face, pale and wet from the rain, had stopped haunting me. It was because I finally felt like the chapter with her was closed. I had told her no. I had told her exactly what I thought of her betrayal, and for once, I didn't feel like the one left broken on the ground. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a steady rhythm. I went back to work, poured myself into a new project, and found solace in the quiet evenings at home with Max curled up by my side. On weekends, I started taking drives out to the state park with Cooper, the rescue dog I'd adopted on a whim. He was a lanky golden retriever with a clumsy gait and big, eager eyes. I didn't realize how much I needed that kind of simple, unfiltered loyalty until I saw him bounding toward me the first time I visited the shelter. Cooper and Max didn't exactly get along at first. Max hissed from his perch on the windowsill whenever Cooper wagged too close. But after a few days, they found a truce. Watching them coexist in the house made me realize something. I could build a new kind of peace. One without Andrea's chaos. Clara stopped by occasionally. At first, it was just to check on me. But soon she started staying for coffee, then dinner. One Sunday afternoon, we found ourselves sitting on the porch as Cooper sprawled in the grass and Max napped inside. She looked at me over her cup and said, "You're handling all this better than I expected." I chuckled. Better than I expected, too. For a while, I thought I'd never get out of the hole she left me in. "You did more than get out of it," Clara said. "You're different now, stronger, and maybe a little colder, but I think that's just you not letting people walk all over you anymore." Her words stayed with me long after she left. Clara had always been the quiet one in Andrea's family, the one who never sought the spotlight. Maybe that's why we understood each other now. We'd both been on the receiving end of Andrea's self-centered whirlwind, and neither of us had come out unscathed. Over time, Clara and I started spending more time together. We didn't label it as anything romantic at first. It was just easy. We'd cook dinner together, talk about her job at the local community center, or watch old movies on rainy nights. But there was a warmth there, something that felt honest in a way my relationship with Andrea never had. Clara wasn't pretending to be someone she wasn't, and she never expected me to be anyone but myself. One night, after a simple dinner of takeout pizza, she leaned back on the couch and said, "Do you ever regret how things turned out with Andrea? I mean, if none of this happened, you'd be married right now." I thought about it for a moment, staring at the flicker of the TV. "No," I said finally. "I think I regret not seeing her for who she really was sooner. But as for now, I feel lighter, like I finally stopped carrying something heavy that wasn't mine to hold." Clara smiled. "Good. You deserve that." The weeks turned into months, and every day that passed, Andrea and Dorian felt more like a cautionary tale than an open wound. I knew from Clara that things between them had collapsed completely. Dorian was still suspended, drinking heavily, and Andrea had moved back in with her parents. She had become the kind of story people whispered about at dinner parties. The girl who thought she'd traded up, only to crash back to reality. I didn't care anymore. My life was simple, quiet, and mine. And that was worth more than any fake happiness Andrea ever promised. By early spring, Dorian's downfall was complete. Mason called me one Friday morning with the update I'd been waiting for. "He's done, Vic," Mason said, his voice almost cheerful. "The board revoked his license. He can appeal, but with the evidence we had, he doesn't stand a chance. His hospital privileges are permanently gone." I thanked him and sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. Dorian, the smug, overconfident doctor who thought he could steal my life and walk away, was finished. The man who once bragged about being the top surgeon on staff was now jobless, blacklisted, and drowning in debt. Karma had finally caught up, and I'd been its delivery man. Andrea wasn't doing much better. Clara told me she'd quit her job after rumors of Dorian's meltdown started to circulate. She couldn't handle the whispers, the questions, the pitying looks. Her parents were furious at her for how she'd handled everything. Even Thomas, who once treated her like the golden child, was avoiding her calls. Andrea's perfect image was shattered. I didn't hear from Andrea directly, but I saw her once. It was by pure coincidence, a random Tuesday afternoon when I was driving home in my newly upgraded Tacoma. I had saved up for that truck for years, and now it felt like a symbol of the life I'd rebuilt. I stopped at a light, and that's when I saw her. She was sitting behind the wheel of a beat-up old sedan, the kind of car she used to scoff at when we were together. For a second, our eyes met. She looked away first, her face pale and tired, a shadow of the woman who once strutted into my life like she owned it. I didn't wave. I didn't even smirk. I just drove off when the light turned green, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. She had made her choices. Now she was living with them. Life with Clara was steady, almost effortlessly so. She wasn't Andrea, and I thank God for that. Clara didn't play games or hide behind fake smiles. We took things slow, starting as friends who happened to share a lot of late-night talks and Sunday dinners. But over time, the connection deepened. One night, while we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, she reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. "You're different now," she said softly. "Stronger, but also calmer." "Guess I finally learned what matters," I said, glancing at her with a small smile. "And what doesn't?" Clara smiled back, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Max and Cooper seemed to sense it too. Max had warmed up to Clara's presence, even curling in her lap when we watched movies. Cooper adored her, following her around the house like a shadow. Our little home, mine, not ours built on lies, felt warm again. I didn't dwell on Andrea or Dorian anymore. They were just lessons now, reminders of what I wouldn't tolerate again. Dorian filed for bankruptcy not long after losing his license, and Andrea was living back with her parents, working part-time to pay off the wreckage she'd created. I never reached out to her, and she never tried again after that night at my door. It was over. As I pulled into my driveway one evening, the sun dipping low and casting the sky in shades of orange, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Clara stepped out of the house, Cooper bounding out behind her, Max watching from the window. I smiled. For the first time since Andrea walked out on my birthday, I knew the storm had passed. My life was mine again, simple, steady, and stronger than ever. And as I walked inside with Clara's hand in mine, I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter one had earned.